of producing public policies for research and innovation, as well as how to involve citizens within the processes of research and innovation, thanks to Marzia Mazzonetto and Agnes Allansdottir. We have also discussed what are the societal benefits of big data, but also their limits and emergent issues like environmental sustainability related to the big data, thanks to Federica Lucivero and Francesco Lescai. And then in the last episode, we have covered the need of more inclusive and gendered policies in and for research and innovation, illustrating some striking examples of gender policies grounded across the world. Today, we will explore the topic of public interest technology. Public interest technology deals with the study as well as the application of technology expertise to advance the public interest in a way that can generate public benefits and promote the public good. On this initiative, mainly United States-based, and how this approach resonates with the principles and the practice of responsible innovation, is about to talk our speaker of today, David Gaston. David Gaston is foundation professor at Arizona State University's School for the Future of Innovation in Society, where David has been director of the school since it was founded 6 years ago. He also serves as associate vice provost for discovery, engagement, and outcomes within the Julian Wrangley Global Futures Laboratory, a novel organizational approach at Arizona State University that houses the College of Global Futures, the Global Institute for Sustainability and Innovation, and numerous other initiatives aimed at ensuring a habitable planet and a future in which well-being is attainable for all humankind. Professor Gaston's important contribution include pioneering work describing boundary organizations, anticipatory governance, and responsible innovation. He has worked at former Office of Technology Assessment of the US Congress and with the National Academy of Sciences, and is a fellow of the American Association for the Advancement of Science, the AAAS. So good morning, David, welcome, and now the stage is yours.
Thank you very much, Angela, for the introduction. It's a pleasure to be with you today, and it's been a pleasure to be part of the regional forum as well, and talking about responsible innovation in an ongoing fashion with the policymakers in the region. Let me share my screen with you for the PowerPoint that I'd like to present, and hopefully there we go. So what I'm going to share with you, at least at the beginning, are a series of images and statements about technology and innovation that I imagine most or all of you already know, but to be reminded of it is crucial for a conversation about responsible innovation and public interest technology. So here we go. So people make technologies, from the very simplest flint knapping technologies that are closely associated with human identity and human evolution, to the most complicated of modern technologies. This is an image of something called the Z machine, which is a capacitor about the size of 2 or 3 tennis courts at Sandia National Laboratories in the United States, that when it's fully charged, creates conditions that simulate those inside of the sun or inside of a nuclear explosion. People make technologies, individual people. Here, Craig Venter, and in the background, his artificial or synthetic organism, Cynthia. People live in, with, and through technologies. So here are some folks sifting through e-waste that could have come from your computer or mine. People live in, with, and through technologies. Here is a piece of border wall that exists between the United States and Mexico. People live in, with, and through technologies like this combination, a glucose sensor and insulin pump that can improve the lives of millions of diabetics. Technological change and social change are closely connected. And of course, this is an historical phenomenon as well. So here's an image of the guillotine during the French Revolution, and we are reminded that the guillotine was in essence an emerging technology of its day, closely associated with the social change wrought by the French Revolution and the terror. And of course, in a mode that we're all familiar with now and that I'm coming to you in, technological change and social change are closely connected. There are multiple technological solutions to a given problem. Here is a close-up of a nanoscale filter that could be used to clear impurities out of water. But there are multiple technological solutions to a given problem. Sari cloth that is very commonly available can be used to nearly the same kind of outcomes as that nanoscale filter in filtering important impurities out of water. Socio-technical change can be incremental, like the latest update to software, or disruptive, like global positioning systems. New technologies are often controversial. This is a protest against fracking in Pittsburgh in the United States, and risky. And again, these are all historical phenomena as well. This is an image of the steamship Sultana, which exploded and burned on the Mississippi River in the United States in 1865, killing over 1,300 people. It was the largest single on-water disaster that the United States experienced. And in the early and mid 19th century, the explosion of steam boilers in steamships was an incredibly challenging technological and economic problem for the early United States, leading to some of the first sort of science-based regulations and inquiries in the early time of the country. Innovation advances human well-being. People online, not to get their COVID vaccine, but to get their polio vaccine a number of decades ago, and can encode existing bias and inequality. And I think in the digital age now, we're all quite aware of the way algorithmic bias can basically encode the biases, the pre-existing biases in society, the pre-existing biases that exist in the World Wide Web, and reproduce them in ways that were not necessarily, but could have been anticipated. Socio-technical systems are difficult or impossible to predict. This is an image of one of the volcanoes from Iceland a number of years ago. And this is an image of the ash cloud that covered the greater portion of Europe as a consequence. And those red squares that you see in the image are airports that were closed due to the ash cloud. And I think you can see Milan in that southernmost red square, although it's not labeled. And it's not as if we did not know that there were volcanoes in Iceland. It's not as if we did not know that prevailing winds would take the ash cloud to Europe. It's not as if we did not know that jet air flight and ash clouds were largely incompatible, but these losses were all uninsured losses. And even if we get it right, and this is an image of Hurricane Katrina in the United States a number of years ago, bearing down on the coast of the Gulf of Mexico and Louisiana in particular, we can get it wrong. And this was the consequence of the failure of some earth walls against flooding in the city of New Orleans, and we knew precisely that this would happen under the circumstances of a hurricane like Katrina, and yet for some set of reasons we were unable to upgrade those earth walls to prepare in any better way than simply have a document that would tell us what would happen. Our socio-technical imaginations shape our future. So you may recognize in the lower right of this image, Captain James T. Kirk from the Starship Enterprise in the old television series Star Trek. Well, Martin Cooper, who worked with Motorola, was a bit of a fan of Star Trek and imagined that he might have something like that little flip-up communicator in Captain Kirk's hands. The story goes that he was wandering around his living room and tripped over a telephone cord and thought to himself, gee, why can't I have this wonderful wireless communication that Captain Kirk has? And Martin Cooper became the inventor of the cell phone. With the iconic brick-like initial cell phone and then the similarly iconic flip phone of Motorola. People play an important role in governing technologies, not just in innovating or inventing them, but deciding how to use them and what to do with them. And this is an image from a participatory technology assessment activity that colleagues of mine in Arizona State University have run about topics like geoengineering, automated vehicles, climate adaptation, and so on. So these set of statements, again, most of which I think you're probably familiar with, but this was just a reminder, raises some crucially important questions. Who innovates? Where do they come from? What communities do they represent? What values do they hold? How, not can we innovate, but how should we innovate? What problems deserve collective effort? How do we frame problems to begin with, such that technology becomes an answer to those problems? So these questions are encoded in these societal responses like responsible innovation and public interest technology. Very briefly about responsible innovation, since I want to focus a little bit more on public interest technology, there's a definition for you on the screen: taking care of the future through collective stewardship of science and innovation in the present. This is perhaps the most concise definition of responsible innovation that we have, and I think it's a very good one. In this definition or others, responsible innovation has been adapted somewhat widely across Europe, and more so in Europe than in the United States, at the European Commission level, where a number of funding programs have focused on responsible innovation, at national funding agencies like the Engineering and Physical Sciences Research Council in the United Kingdom, and of course at the regional level like the Lombardy Regional Forum. I want to spend a little bit more time talking about public interest technology. Here's a definition that comes from David Eves and colleagues at Harvard University: the set of capabilities to create, apply, study, and use new technologies, and an understanding of the core ethical, legal, policy, and societal dimensions of technological change. And you can see how this definition will overlap importantly with responsible innovation and with other areas of the study of science and technology, particular fields like science and technology studies or science, technology, and society. Public interest technology, or PIT, is being adopted across the United States, importantly through a university network, the Pitt University Network, that was initially founded by the Ford Foundation and other nonprofit philanthropies, with New America, which is a non-profit organization itself, as the organizing force. And right now it exists as a network of 43 member universities and colleges. a great impetus for the development of PIT in the United States came out of the Facebook hearings of 2018. And you can see Mark Zuckerberg here testifying before a Senate committee in the US Senate, and all the attention that these hearings received through the media. And it was something of a test, a sort of a Rorschach blot, a test of your fundamental orientation or disposition. If you thought, well, all these old guys sitting around asking Zuckerberg these crazy questions didn't really understand what tech was about, or if you took the other perspective and thought that Zuckerberg and the other tech executives really didn't understand what the political inquiry and all the political fuss was about. And it was, I think, to the credit of the Ford Foundation and the initiators of public interest technology that they realized that this was a problem on both sides, that there was not enough technological sophistication and expertise in the halls of power, and neither was there enough understanding about the political, social, and ethical aspects of technology among the technologists. So a couple generations ago, in the late 60s, early 70s, the Ford Foundation helped create a field called public interest law. And as you might imagine, public interest technology is built upon that. Public interest law basically observed that law students in the United States at that time could really only envision and pursue two different kinds of careers. One in which they went into private practice as lawyers serving clients, a second in which they became in-house counsel for large corporations. In either event, the attention that those lawyers were providing was to people who, in essence, could afford to pay for their services. And the Ford Foundation, having an important heritage and interest in equality in society, which was somewhat in distinct counterpoise to the beliefs of Henry Ford himself, whose fortune created the Ford Foundation. Although Henry Ford was very much into creating things for the masses, he was also, for example, a vicious anti-Semite. Public interest law took the disposition that the law as an instrument of governance, as an instrument of the public, should be able to serve the public interest as well as private interests, that people with legal training should be able to support people even if they could not pay for it. People with legal training should be able to work in the context of nonprofits to create public goods and so on. And then this sensibility is reproduced in the context of public interest technology. And as I said, Ford Foundation and a number of other funders, Hewlett Foundation included, work with New America to create a university network dedicated to public interest technology. And this university network, the PIT UN, was created in 2019 after a number of years of a working group that had been meeting under New America and Ford, involving a number of university presidents and provosts, so at the highest level of these participating universities. Shortly after the network launched, a colleague at University of Michigan, Shobita Parthasarathi, and I published this piece in the Chronicle of Higher Education, the sort of leading periodical about higher education in the United States, addressing the role that colleges and universities must play in bridging these concepts of technology and the public interest. One of the challenges that we faced in that article, and that the field of public interest technology faces, is that in some sense it's a latecomer. The ideas of responsible innovation have not just been institutionalized in places like the European Commission for, a decade, but have been kicking around for a decade longer than that. And these other pre-existing academic fields like science and technology studies or science, technology, and society have been established at universities since the late 1960s, early 1970s, roughly the timetable of public interest law as well. And in contrast to public interest law, public interest technology is not focused on a specific field, a specific discipline like law, or a specific professional organization like law. And so the Ford Foundation produced these series of images to hint to people that they might be identifying with public interest technology, even if they didn't know the term, even if they hadn't even considered it. So you probably don't identify as a technologist or as a public interest technologist, but you have these multiple hats that you wear in your roles, because you believe that technology should be used to advance justice, equity, and inclusion, because you think it's time to rethink what good technology is. It's not just new, it's not just cool, but it actually does something to serve the public interest. Because your career path has taken you in all these different directions that contribute to the values that you hold about what it is that technology can do and who it can serve. And that you're not even identifying necessarily with a particular field. That is, in this vision, what public interest technology is meant to do. It's meant to give you a home in which you can marry those thoughts of ethics, of public interest, and so on, with the thoughts of science, technology, and innovation that you've had. This has been manifest in important ways recently in the United States, even outside of the Public Interest Technology University Network. So, for example, the new administration of President Joe Biden, when he was still president-elect, nominated Alondra Nelson, who is a sociologist of science and technology, to be the deputy director for the Office of Science and Technology Policy for Science and Society. This is, in essence, a responsible innovation or public interest technology position at the seat of science policy in the Biden administration. There are numerous nonprofit organizations already working in this space. One of my favorite that operates at a regional level in a way like the Regional Forum in Lombardy is the Tech Equity Collaborative. Its chief executive officer is Catherine Bracey, pictured here, and the Tech Equity Collaborative works on issues of housing, the economy, and work in the San Francisco Bay Area. So at the very heart of Silicon Valley, here is a nonprofit organization that is talking about the way, for example, algorithms keep African-American people from taking advantage of loans and equitable housing opportunities. Questions about, it was recently on a ballot initiative in the state of California about the nature of gig workers, those who work with Uber and Lyft and those kinds of new contractors. Are they contractors or are they employees? Those are the kinds of social justice issues related to evolving technologies that the Tech Equity Collaborative works on. And organizations from the private sector like Giving Tech Labs, that is in essence it provides equity and seed capital for entrepreneurs, tech startups that have social missions, that have public interest missions in the tech that they are developing. And so to draw this to a close, I just want to point out that public interest technology, even though localized in the United States right now, is providing some additional opportunities. And so as we speak, the membership committee within the Public Interest Technology University Network is deliberating on how to include non-US institutions as associate and ultimately full members in the PIT UN. And that opportunity would come with the opportunity to collaborate with the 43 current members of the PIT UN and access to small challenge grants that the philanthropists are funding to develop PIT-related programs at universities. NGOs and public institutions may also get a kind of affiliate status. There are opportunities to share perspectives through newsletters, blogs, and opinion spaces. And just in closing, a final brag, my university, Arizona State University, and my school for the Future of Innovation and Society has introduced the world's first Master of Science degree in public interest technology. This is an online degree, and so it is available to people who are interested in exploring public interest technology across the planet and not just in Arizona. So thank you very much for your attention, for exploring this little bit of responsible innovation and public interest technology with me, and happy to take some questions and engage in discussion.
Thank you very much, David, for this inspiring, interesting speech presenting this initiative on public interest technology. As we have said, of course, the principle, the basis is very similar to responsible innovation, what we have tried to ground in the context of Lombardy territory, thanks to the work of the forum, of course, and you know, also for the activities of Bassetti Foundation. Responsible innovation is our main aim since 27 years. I don't know if there are questions for David GUSTON in the panel of the participants today in the Zoom meeting. I remind you that this meeting can be watched thanks to the web streaming on the Open Innovation channel, as well as participating, and as our participants in the Zoom room are doing, thanks to the participation in the room. So if there are some questions from the participants, of course, this is I see a raise hand. Giuseppe Riva, please, the stage is yours for your question today.
Thank you, David, for the nice presentation. I am Giuseppe Riva. I am a professor at Catholic University in Milano, where I am the director of the Humane Technology Lab. And I agree on your vision. And I was curious about your vision about artificial intelligence. You know that in Europe, in the last weeks, the European Commission presented the first draft with the specific guidelines for driving the growth of artificial intelligence in many different applications. I don't know if you, within your vision, you have a specific vision about how a responsible innovation has to be applied in this specific field, artificial intelligence. I'm very curious about that, because I know that in US, there are different positions about the use of artificial intelligence. So given your vision, I'm very curious about what do you think about that?
Thank you. Yeah, I'm not particularly familiar with that specific instance that you cite, and artificial intelligence is not one of my direct areas of expertise, although I had a student a few years ago named Miles Brundage, whose doctoral dissertation was on responsible innovation in artificial intelligence, and he has gone off to work at least for some period of time with DeepMind and Google, which has had its own problems with thinking about ethics and having employees challenged by decisions that it's made, as well as by firing some of those employees. First, I think that a number of conversations with which I'm familiar in the United States about the ethical, responsible aspects of artificial intelligence seem to me to be a little bit too if you will, superficial, that we're being told on the one hand that we should worry very deeply, on the other hand that things are absolutely just fine and people have everything under control. And that sort of dichotomy, I think, always leads to problems. And I'm not sure that, as was with the case that I studied very deeply, say in nanotechnology and in synthetic biology, for example, cases that I'm a bit more familiar with, the nuances of the various different kinds of ways that we could think about governing the emerging technology become crucially important. And so are we talking about something where in the AI case, we try to hardwire it in to what it is that the AI or the machine learning is doing? Or is it some sort of external control that we impose on it? Or is it ways in which we as a society limit the roles that artificial intelligence or machine learning can behave and can be used? So there, and how is it that we condition our own expectations for the responsible use of artificial intelligence, or for that matter, its irresponsible use? And so the hope that I have in governing just about any kind of emerging technology responsibly and toward the public interest is first to think across the set of governing mechanisms that we have, and not just think about how it is that we program the AI to be responsible or don't do it. So is that a helpful start?
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks a lot. Any other question? In the meantime, I have a curiosity, David, about the public interest technology. You said that there is a sort of space in which there are not just technologists, but people revolving around the technology as a whole. So also people with use, apply technology, govern, shape the technology world. I think this is really interesting because it means that we envision the idea of technology is a very large concept in which also citizens can have a role in shaping the technology and how to use it. But I'm really curious to know, when we talk about technology in the context of this approach, we are talking about digital technology, or there is a large concept of technology, so also genome editing, so genetic engineering, biomed technology, technology applied to energy and climate change, or the focus is more on digital technology, also perhaps because there is a urgent matter to think about and reflect upon this kind of technology because of the presence of big giant firms governing digital technology in the United States. So I'm curious to know a little bit more about this.
Yeah, so I see that as sort of two parts, one about the public and the other about the breadth of technologies. And my fundamental orientation is that you're not going to get public interest technology without the public in a variety of ways. And more precisely, the existing political institutions that we tend to have, our legislatures, our executive offices, our presidents or prime ministers, whoever they may happen to be, for them, most of the time, issues of science, technology, and innovation are not the most salient, not the most important to what it is that they're doing as a representative of the public. And so we don't get the kinds of robust discussions that we might want to have that would give us better technologies and innovation in the public interest through our traditional political institutions. And therefore, it's, I think, crucially important to consider what other kinds of ways of channeling the public interest we might create. And so that image that I showed, the overhead image of the people sitting around a table engaged in what I called a participatory technology assessment, creating these other kinds of forums for the discussion of what it is that people want out of their science, technology, and innovation, how it is that the public interest can be constructed in more direct conversation with the public is quite crucial, because a lot of those voices will never be heard. In fact, one of the early participatory technology assessment activities that my colleagues at ASU and I did was for the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, NASA, in the United States, because of the very simple fact that when NASA looked outside itself to a public to find out what the American people thought about it, they had a very close bubble of space enthusiasts and people who believed one way or another about what should be going on in space, and people who were caught up in the debate between human space exploration, robotic space exploration. And they wanted to get outside of that bubble. And so they came to us, and we designed this participatory technology assessment process with 100 average people in Boston and 100 average people in Phoenix. And the process actually led to a document that became part of what is technically called a decision document. That is what the staff prepares for the administrator of NASA to make a decision about how to pursue space projects related to asteroids. And you can see in the programs that followed on that were authorized by NASA, the trace of the findings of the public deliberations in what it was that the NASA administrator decided to do. Now, I don't know whether the public actually influenced the NASA administrator, but the traces are there. I don't know what went on inside his head. And so finding these alternate ways of expression, these alternate ways of understanding and expressing the public interest is quite crucial and demonstrated in this, at least in this particular case, to be important. Now, the set of technologies that are implicated here are, I think, as I suggested to Giuseppe, they are wide and vast and implicit in your question as well. We're not just talking about digital technologies, although the important role of the digital technologies was crucial in the vision of the public interest technology network in the United States, if only because many of the actors involved in founding that network were deeply involved in the Obama administration's efforts to create digital platforms, for example, around healthcare and integrate new digital technologies into governing. And so that's been an important focal point for them. And some of us who have been involved in governing emerging technologies over the longer period of time have been trying to encourage the similar presence of AI and robotics and machine learning, of nanotechnology, of synthetic biology, and so on. And I think, at least in the United States, we're, that effort will end up being successful in broadening out the kinds of technologies that are included here for two reasons. One, because we, hopefully are at the end of what is a global pandemic, a biological crisis that has interacted interestingly with the digital world, facilitating the development and normality of these Zoom interactions, but also digital tools that help track the spread of the virus and so on. But as I showed in the image of Alondra Nelson, the Deputy Director of the Office of Science and Technology Policy, she will be reporting to a new director of that office, who is a mathematical biologist by training from MIT, which is Eric Lander.
Eric Lander.
Yeah, and Eric Lander will have a new position as director of OSTP at the cabinet level. So he will be part of President Biden's cabinet, along with the secretaries of Health and Human Services, of Defense, of State, of Transportation, and so on. And so that will create additional prominence to emerging tech around the biological sciences. So I think that, so much of the attention has been digital. That's where so much of the innovation has been. But we, at our risk, we don't pay attention to the biological and other emerging tech in this area.
Thank you. Another thing that I think, another feature that I think is really interesting of this approach, that and especially the Pitt University network, has the scope to train and educate not just technology that can reflect about their roles in society and what are the societal benefits or risk on doing or making and designing technology, but also educate and train future public officer to regulate and steer and govern technology. And I think this is a really important. The image that we saw about Zuckerberg and how the situation was unfold, and so the really silly question made by the Congress that of course we read in the media. Let's can think about that. Definitely policy officer and policymaker sometimes are not ready to steer and to govern the technology because they don't know enough about how the technology is conceived and designed. So I think this is another relevant part of this initiative. And I would like to know if in Arizona State University, because it seems that each university has its own path, its own course approach to the network. There is something devoted to public officials or the officers and how they interact with the world of technologists and people revolving around the technology.
Yeah, so we have actually a number of programs, both with respect to degrees and with respect to training programs. And in the introduction that you provided for me very generously, you described me as the founding director of the School for the Future of Innovation and Society. And so we've been in existence for 6 years at ASU. And part of our vision, well, our sort of tagline is "the future is for everyone." Okay, and that goes back, to this idea that you don't get public interest technology or things like that without the public, that we all have not just a stake in the future, but dealing with the future is what we do sort of natively as individuals. And yes, different cultures have different perspectives about time. Some are more linear, some are more cyclical, but at some more fundamental level, there are concerns that we all have about what happens after this webinar is over. How are we putting dinner on the table? What are we, how are our families going to change over time? How will we provide for ourselves in the long term? How will the larger communities that we care about sustain themselves over time? These are all future-oriented questions that we all have as part of our regular existence. And so the undergraduate degree program, the bachelor's degree program that we have, is meant to help students thematize these ideas about futures for themselves. Our introductory course is called Welcome to the Future, to get students to do exactly this. And we see that as a groundwork for creating a different kind of literacy about the relationship between science, technology, and society, and the environment besides. That is, I think, part of the fundamental nature of contemporary existence. If you think about the set of challenges that students right now are going to be facing in the job market, in the world that they're going to be living in the world that they're going to be creating families in, then the interpenetration, the interaction of the social world, the technical world, the environment, things that we had in previous generations treated as utterly separate, the way that those interact in a deep and systemic fashion is a fundamental fact of that world. And so it's not just about, and this is perhaps a critique that I have about the Public Interest Technology University Network, it's not just about training people to serve in informed ways in governing roles, but it's about really reconfiguring what we expect citizens to know in the way they manage their lives. I mean, we almost all have devices like this, and we almost all have experiences where devices like this have created difficulties in interpersonal and family relationships. Okay, so many of us have deeply personal interactions with medical technologies now, not just the diabetics who have the insulin monitors and pumps that I showed on the slide, but people who have involvement with reproductive technologies, with end-of-life technologies, and so on. These are all experiences that are so broad throughout society now that this is, dealing with these issues is part of what it means, quite literally, to be a human being, to be an active citizen, and so on. So we take that approach in our undergraduate education. As I mentioned in the slide, at the end of the slide deck, we have a new master's program online for public interest technology, where we are training people from all sorts of backgrounds. Some of them are coming from the sciences and engineering. Some of them are coming from public service already, in these specific techniques of things like co-design and co-creation, technology assessment, public participation and engagement, and so on. And then some perhaps specific courses in different technologies around emerging tech and so on. We also have a set of programs, some of these very long-standing, where we take scientists and engineering students at the doctoral level, sometimes at the postdoctoral level, and bring them to Washington, D.C. In what it is that science does and how science is understood and received in the corridors of power.
Thank you. I think it's very nice what you said before about the role of university. This is not just to train people, students, the future policymakers or technologists, but it's a really important role to shape citizenry and to have a role in the public arena, in the public dialogue, discussing about and reflecting upon the impact of technology, of science, innovation in society. I think it's really, really important, and it's a new and enhanced role of the university, not just to train students. That, of course, it's the main mission of the universities. The last thing about the spreading the word and collaborating with non-US university, I think that technology in itself, and I'm thinking especially about some key issues of technology like privacy, for example, it's not just a matter of limits or borders or USA, and it really needed a collaboration and exchange and a dialogue with other people across the world. If we think about privacy, of course, European Union as a leading role, and some tech giant like Apple has endorsed and embraced the approach of the GDPR. So it's really important to have an exchange with universities and institutions and NGOs and a foundation also beyond the borders of the United States. So I think this is what the initiative is starting to do, is I have understood well what you presented before.
No, I think that's absolutely right. And again, the different kinds of issues, even across different technologies. And so as we're thinking about, for example, the kinds of interventions that gene editing technologies will allow us to engage in right now, we're, I think, just a month or two after the release of the first genetically modified mosquitoes in the southern part of the United States to help head off the spread of dengue fever. So that's, and at least a hemispheric-wide phenomenon, the spread of these mosquitoes spreading dengue, and the decision-making around that needs to be more broad, because the mosquitoes don't know where Florida ends and the rest of the Caribbean begins. And it's an older question around genetic engineering, but still a very fundamental one, and it has its analogs in the digital world as well, that you actually don't know what the consequences are of doing something at large scale until you actually try it in some larger scale fashion, that there's almost no difference between a mid-sized experiment and a full-scale intervention. And that's the case with a lot of these biological interventions. That's the case with technologies around geoengineering that people are thinking about, in climate interventions. There are some digital technologies that share that characteristic as well.
Thank you. As our all the participants of these meetings know quite well, at the very end of this webinar series, we are talking a little bit about the task and the activities made so far by the forum. So I would like to ask you, David, some specific things about these and the activities of the forum. In your speech, you have also mentioned Professor Alondra Nelson and her role as a science and society advisor to the President Biden. The forum somehow resembles a role, even if with 10 members, but the approach is quite similar. So do you think that governments across the world needs more and more support in responsibly govern and steer taking innovation? So this kind of advisory figures are really needed in our world today.
Yeah, so I think it's absolutely crucial that this kind of advisory relationship can exist around issues of responsible innovation and public interest technology, sort of as I, linked to what I said before about the traditional institutions not often being able to grapple with changing technologies because there are many more things that the traditional politicians in those places see as salient or important for their political success than the nuances of science, technology, and innovation. And one of the things that traditionally political leaders will often grab onto is the uncertain promises that are made for science and technology, for better or for worse. And that's something I think that this kind of advisory apparatus can help sort through a little bit, can lend some expertise into trying to sift through where things are a little bit more certain, where things are a little bit less certain, to connect with other kinds of experts outside of government entirely, in the private sector, in the non-governmental organizations, and provide a mediating role to those things, to those other organizations. Another thing, and I think the experience of the forum, from my perspective, was also quite interesting in that, to an important extent, all of this is a learning enterprise. Okay, that even if we get things wrong sometimes, we still need to be able to learn from those things that we get wrong. And when you do something the first time, like this forum, there will be things that that will not happen as smoothly as you anticipate them happening, and that can be corrected and creating that you can learn from and make for a better relationship. And I think that's perhaps the most important thing that advisory processes and advisory apparatuses can create, and that's a learning relationship between the people who are, sort of offering advice, and the people who are massaging policy, and the people who are making policy, and the people who are acting as political leaders. And to create a kind of learning institution in that way is quite crucial. And certainly of the things that I hope might have been learned in the context of the forum by all parties, I would point to, and this is, a lot of blame I think goes on the pandemic itself, because we were derailed in our ability to interact in important ways through the pandemic. But the ability to have these conversations to begin the learning as early as possible in the process, to engage with publics, to engage with diverse experts, even early in the agenda setting and problem formulation stage of the process is, I think, quite crucial, because that's where all the participants are at a more equal footing, if you will, experts and non-experts, early in the process, where the set of values that are informing the whole process can be brought together, and not a situation where later in the process you end up with experts pitted against non-experts, people with this interest pitted against that interest. The earlier we start, the earlier we create these learning environments, the more equitable kind of approach that we have, and the more different sorts of values get to be incorporated into the learning.
Thanks a lot. Thanks to David GUSTON for his speech and also for this reflection of the activity of the forum. I kindly remind you that we have other two appointments, other two events of our webinar series. Next week on 29th, we will have a webinar together with Ralph Lindner and Douglas Robinson, talking about missions and this approach that is getting momentum in the European Commission, but also at national and local level. So I think it will be interesting to listen to them about this approach, in which the so-called quadruple helix, so policymakers, citizens, innovators, and researchers work together to co-design, co-create, and co-evaluate this approach to govern research and innovation. Thank you to all the attendees of today, and thanks again, Dave GUSTON, for your inspiring speech.
Thank you,
have a nice night, all of you.
Good evening.